Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Good News Conversations here on the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gino Gutierrez, Good News reporter here at the Albuquerque Journal, joined by a very special guest today, Maralyn Beck, the founder and executive director of New Mexico Child First Network. Maralyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
And Maralyn, you're here for a very special reason. You guys held an awesome event over the weekend. We'll get to that in just a little bit, but I was hoping you could tell our listeners a little bit about the organization that you founded.
So I'm a native New Mexican. I am 39 for a few short more months, and I was a single foster parent. I've worked for APS. I've worked in the legislature. I've done advocacy. And as just someone, I'm the oldest of four. I didn't have kids. I became a foster parent. And so pretty quickly, I was in my early 30s. Pretty quickly, I realized how broken foster care was and how broken CYFD was. And I've worked in government bureaucracy, right? And so I started an organization, New Mexico Child First Network, with a board of foster parents, pediatricians. We have a superintendent, like child advocates. And to just, I actually looked for national organizations that could just come in and we could be part of. And there really wasn't. And so in 2018, I started an organization to improve the lives of children in foster care and empower those who serve them. And that's the organization. And
you fostered quite a bit of children. I remember you mentioning that to me.
As a single foster parent in a 2-bedroom house from while I was licensed, 39. And so it's funny when for those of your listeners, like we hear so often, and I'm so excited to actually be on a Good News podcast, right? Because we hear the worst and the worst stories. And I remember in 2017, it was the case that pushed me to become a foster parent. It was Christmas 2017, and it was the baby who died while in foster care in a car seat. And she hadn't, in Los Lunas, and she hadn't been touched for at least 12 hours. She had a soiled diaper, and she died in a car seat. And my siblings had started to have babies, and I thought, I can't do a lot, but I can order the pizza with the best of them. And I started with foster care. And so I've had kids from 3 days old to 17 and a half, and then fostering connections. I stay in touch with some of my teens who are now adults.
And you have an intimate personal connection, as you mentioned, with the foster care system, which led you to found New Mexico Child First Network. And you've done a lot of advocacy work, and some of the advocacy work you did led to the event that happened this past weekend, the Foster Family and Friends Fishing and Picnic Extravaganza. This is the second annual event. Can you tell us a little bit how this event got started last year and what inspired it?
Well, it's so interesting. One of the things when I was a first foster parent in 2018, 2019, I realized you come in and you just feel like you're flooded at the bottom of an ocean with no help and no thanks. I was surprised, and I didn't want thanks, but I felt like it was instantly adversarial and difficult. So I wanted, and I worked with legislators, we wanted to do something to thank foster parents. And so the first bill we passed was a free fishing license for youth in care, and then free passes to state museums and state parks. So 4 years later, just in the 2023, and so this is so frustrating with how our legislature works. During the 2019 session, we were approached by the youth aging out of foster care, the Fostering Connections. And they said, we're going to oppose your bill unless you add us into it. And it was on the Senate floor to be passed. It was like the midnight of the last night. So we tried to add them in. It was just too late. It took us 4 years to come back. This year in 2013 or 2023, we expanded the bill to all foster youth, all youth who've aged out of foster care, all tribal partners, and all foster families. So free fishing. And here's the thing, and it was really, really awesome, especially during the pandemic, is it was what we were trying to do originally, and what we succeeded last year was thank foster parents, right? So it never occurred to me, we tried to give kids fishing licenses, but we kind of forgot the foster parents. So with the expansion last year, we also got 3-day camping passes. It was a way to say thank you for being a foster parent. That's it. Thank you. And we know it's really hard, and we have a shortage of foster families, but and you saw it firsthand, is the cool thing about being outdoors is it doesn't matter if you have one kid or 15, right? No one has 15 kids, but bigger families love outdoor activities because you can take your kids camping and it's not $20 per kid at the zoo, right? So last year we have always done a foster care picnic in May. May is Foster Family Awareness. It's Foster Care Month. We've always done that as an organization just to say, bring the kids out, let's have some hot dogs. And last year when the bill passed, it was actually my boyfriend, who's an avid fisher, who said, why don't we take the kids to Tingley? And so the day the governor signed the bill, it was so significant. It passed House and Senate unanimously. We are the second state to do it, but the first state to do such an expansive law. Oregon has free fishing licenses for all adoptive families. So that's something we would like to see eventually. But we're the second state to do anything like this. And we said, instead of our picnic, let's go fish. And what became, let's just go to Tingley Beach, we started raising money organically. We asked for donations. And we took last year 400 families fishing, this year over 600. And every single kid that comes, having done it the second year, it's kind of cool because people were looking forward to it, right? Mm-hmm. And some kids had outgrown their fishing poles or told others about it. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I do think this is a good news podcast, but I think on the opposite side of that, I think CYFD gets bogged down in just their day-to-day activities. So they really struggle to have these activities. So for a year, we've had families just looking forward to it. And we've had community partners. Albertsons came out and donated the food and grilled the food. Walmart donated bait. The Outdoor Equity Fund this year sponsored some of our activities. So again, we bought everyone fishing poles. And it was one of my favorite things was in applying for the Outdoor Equity Grant. We asked kids who'd been last year to draw their pictures of what it was like. So we submitted kids' drawings, and it was like, I caught a fish. And it was kids going outside, foster families getting to sit down. That's my favorite part about the volunteers helping kids. It's an incredible event that I hope to do for as long as I am on this planet.
Yeah, and it was an awesome event because, as you mentioned, Maralyn, was kind of twofold. The kids got out, they got in nature, they got to have fun, but the foster parents themselves also got a break as well. And there was also the New Mexico Game and Fish Department were out there. They were signing people up for their licenses. Got a chance to speak to Ryan with Game and Fish. He was talking about the importance of getting those kids outside and getting them interacting with nature. And I know for you, that was also one of the key goals as well, is you want these kids out here interacting, not being, stuck in the house all the time.
Well, and it's not just that. So CYFD unfortunately has kids sleeping in offices. And this year they took a bus. They now have a bus to take these kids on field trips. So CYFD drove a bus full of kids that are sleeping in the offices to come. They spent the whole day. They have teen boys sleeping in the offices. And it was funny because I guess the teen boys were teen boys and not looking forward to spending the day with little kids. And the head of the office said, Maralyn, he didn't stop fishing. Like the teen boys just went and they did their own thing. Tingley Beach, if you haven't been since kindergarten or, elementary school, go out. It's 5 acres. There's 5 separate ponds. So we did give kids the agency to be on their own. And that's the nice thing about fishing is we had a little kids pond, which is a kiddie pool with magnetic fish in the shade. And that was adorable for the kids that were too little to fish. And we had little kid ponds, but then the big kids, the teens. And this is one of the things is that kids in foster care or who have been adopted have experienced trauma. Let's just start there. That's just where they are, right? If you start to learn about trauma, if you start to learn about what heals trauma and resiliency, being outside in nature is one of those things, right? And you think about that. I just think about the kids that are locked in the office all day and they're watching TV. That's not a healing experience, right? And you think about, we kind of have forgotten to be outside, which is the Outdoor Equity Grant, getting kids outside is so cool. But you see, and I wish all of your viewers, and I hope you can show some pictures, and they're on NewMexicoChildFirst.org and our Facebook page, but you see kids being kids. And I actually looked at one of our city councilors who was there, Renee Grout, and I said, I wish Tingley Beach looked like this every weekend, right? There were vendors and there was food and there was kids just fishing. And you saw it firsthand, the worms. Mm-hmm. So there were little red worms that you can get in your garden and these night crawlers from Canada that were 6 to 8 inches, 12 inches. Kids like to play in the dirt. Kids were playing with worms. The bait was smelly, right? At some point, it's a sensory experience, and we get kids outside. It was a perfect day. But our other hope is that we can really transform this. So fishing passes are good for a year. They can go fishing tonight, right? So we've given the rest of our fishing poles that we had extras of to the receiving center, which is at CYFD. Mm-hmm. So for the kids sleeping in the office, Tingley Beach is open from sunrise to sundown. They can go out tonight. And again, I think that's the whole point of fishing, right? You're very unlikely to catch a fish, but have fun trying, right? And so I hope they're lifelong skills, but I think there's a song by some country singer that's like, they thought they were fishing, but they're creating memories. Like, I hope that that's part of the experience too.
Yeah, and it definitely seemed like it was, because there were smiling faces on each and every one of those kids. As you mentioned, all of the kids got free fishing poles as well. You had a ton of advertisers out there. You had Albertsons, as you mentioned, grilling food for the families. But the biggest thing about it, and in the conversation we had, was just how much the event had grown in just 1 year. You had mentioned about 400-ish families at the first year. This year you had 600. Could you have imagined it would have grown in just 1 year?
No, and it's just from where I was as a foster parent to where I support the foster community, it also just shows the need to have community. Foster care can be very isolating. It's hard. I was single, right? Like, the kids I would have in and out of my care, I would be sometimes nervous to take them to Sunday night dinner, right? Because I could get a kid on a Friday and we'd have Sunday family dinner. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Are they going to have an allergy, or, or they don't like lights, or what are their trauma and what are their triggers? And so as a foster parent, as a single foster parent, as just a foster parent, working with kids with trauma is isolating. It's challenging. The department is frustrating. Having a time to just be around other families in the same community, going through the same thing. We have respite providers, which means foster families can take a day off. Meeting those people who can help you. I'm telling you, people have looked forward to this event since last year. It happened this year. It happened last year. It was actually last year. It was a 14-year-old boy, and he came up to my boyfriend. My boyfriend was grilling last year. So this year, so it's already grown, and we have volunteers grilling this year. And he came up at the end of the event last year, and he tried to hand my boyfriend back his fishing pole. And my boyfriend said, no, this is yours. And he looked and was like, what? And my boyfriend, I think it was a time in my advocacy work that it clicked for him, is that this child, who was a young teenager, 14, had something that was his own. And he can keep that fishing pole. And it's a fishing pole. And I heard parents be like, my kids are sleeping with their fishing pole. They're so excited, right? In foster care, we don't have a lot of things that kids have their own. And so to gift them that, to gift parents the experience that they got to gift that, to know that families have been excited. So we had families come from Las Cruces. We had a family come from Deming, Farmington, Gallup, Grants, Santa Fe, Las Lunas, Belen, Roswell. I'm trying to think where else families came from. To know that families drove from out of the Bernalillo County metro area to come to this, like, it just shows you how excited they were. And I really hope we do more things like this. The dream would be to grow it, there are lakes in Farmington and, Las Cruces. And also, like, to do more events like this to just appreciate foster families.
And one thing that you mentioned to me on Saturday when the event took place, Maralyn, that really kind of stuck out was you talked about all of the volunteers, all of the vendors that were there, all of the public officials that was there. The Secretary of CYFD, Teresa Casados, was there. And you really kind of talked about how the event is ideology, you really want that to be the impetus of foster care.
Yes.
You want that to be what foster families have to look forward to, they can experience, because as you mentioned, it's a very daunting thing to want to take on. You did it single-handedly as a single parent. There's a lot of our readers that probably read that story that may be considering becoming a foster parent, but how important is community to being a foster parent?
If you see our advertisements, actually that's how it started, is that in 2019 and 2018, when we were organic, trying to become a nonprofit organically, we said it takes a village. This is the village. And I have never needed a village so deeply as when I was a foster parent. Because I've never had kids. So there are foster parents who are so seasoned and know what daycare to put your kids in and what diapers to buy or where to have the vouchers for the clothing. And when I was new to this, actually that's how some of my network and my village started. I had posted on Nextdoor that I was going to become a foster parent. So if anyone was getting rid of things or secondhand, send them to me. And I actually had someone reach out. She's still a foster parent. Her and her husband are. And she said, her name's Dr. Ashley. Won't share her last name, but she's a doctor, and we call her Dr. Ashley. And Dr. Ashley said, my husband and I have been licensed for just over a year. We were both D1 athletes, and nothing has been so frustrating as learning CYFD. So she said, we want to mentor you. And I thought she was crazy at the first time. I thought that was a crazy thing, but learning and creating that organic village and knowing that I wasn't alone, that other people were frustrated. I wouldn't call it gaslighting as much as like, there's no way this can be this hard. Something must be wrong with me. How do I submit my reimbursement? My caseworker isn't answering my calls. Like it's an inherently complex process that knowing that Game and Fish gives licenses for foster families now is like mind-blowing for some of these people. Again, you can be a foster parent today, but your caseworker might not know that you have free access to every state-owned museum tomorrow, right? So there's a lot of that historical knowledge, bringing that to everyone in person on Saturday. What therapies don't have wait lists right now? Everyone wants to know, right? So that bringing those resources to the front lines, it really does take a village. And I said, for your listeners or for your readers, how can you support foster families? Maybe you know a grandparent raising a grandchild. Offer to make them lasagna, right? Or, bring them a cake or something, like, check in on them. New Mexico has the highest number of grandparents raising grandkids in the country.
Oh, wow.
And so that's very significant. We have the highest number of kinship caregivers. And so not all those are with CYFD. For every one grandparent or kin that's raising a child within the CYFD custody system, there are 18 that are not. And that takes the village. Maybe it's your church. Maybe it's your LGBT community center. Maybe it's your Lions Club or your Rotary Club. But like, in a space that we're all doing the best we can at every day, and sometimes it's still not enough, knowing that there are those resources, ABQ, open community or open space, they brought all their leftover sunflowers, tomatoes, and cantaloupe. So any kid that wanted a cantaloupe on Saturday got to take home like a starter plant.
Yeah.
That was cool, right? Like we had the South Valley Gardeners out. We had the Sierra Club. We had home visiting. Like, there is a place that everyone can do this together. And maybe after the pandemic, whatever it is, we've forgotten how important community is, but I'm hoping Saturday was part of that.
Yeah, and it definitely was. I mean, I know I left feeling, overjoyed for those kids because you could tell how much it meant for them. I mean, you mentioned that foster care can be instability a lot of the time. These kids could be moving from room to room, from home to home, but you mentioned how powerful the permanency of handing them a fishing pole and that being theirs for them to keep, giving them a sense of permanency. And it's a very powerful thing because I don't think a lot of people really think about that with foster kids. The fact that, their life is in flux a lot of the time, but to have a time and space for them to be, like you mentioned, for kids to be kids, for them to have a fishing pole that they get to keep, I can't even imagine how powerful that was for them.
One of the favorite stories I have, which from Saturday, and there were just so many, and there's so many stories, which I'm grateful for podcasts because I listen to podcasts to hear stories. So the Receiving Center, which is where kids come into care and they are received at CYFD, it is a state office building on San Mateo and Indian School. They do have kids sleeping there. And there was a little girl. So the Receiving Center staff brought all the kids sleeping in offices, and I think she was about 12 or 13. And she's been sleeping in the office. The CYFD workers were doing face painting. So if you saw any of the kids with face painting, it was the CYFD workers. Well, one of the kids sleeping in the Receiving Center started doing face painting, and she did face painting for the whole 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And even the Secretary Casadas was like, she is so excited. And it was also a space, it was a space that we didn't label you in foster care. It was a foster care event, and for everyone listening to this, the kids were in foster care. But one of the things that we really strive to with my organization is help educate the public on how to engage with kids in foster care. So if you noticed, the New Mexico Council of Guides and Outfitters, they're hunters and anglers. They helped kind of with us this bill and helped us make it happen. This year they sponsored hats for kids at Tingley. There's not a lot of shade. You need hats. And so the executive director had originally sent me the hats, and they said Foster Family Picnic 2024. And I said, actually, I don't want it to say foster care, because these kids might not have nice hats. And if we're gifting them a really nice hat, I want them to be able to wear it to school without identifying that they're in foster care, right? The little girl that painted faces, like, she was just a kid that day, right? So the hats is such an important issue to me for the same reason, is that I didn't single out kids for being in foster care. Nothing permanent that they will receive said, I was in foster care on, June 1st, 2024. It's important to remind the community that these are just kids. And so they all took home, I found out, their Richardson 112 hats, which apparently is like a fancy hat. Didn't even know. But it says Family Fishing Day. And that is a hat you and I could wear tomorrow. That's a hat a kid in foster care could wear tomorrow. That's a hat a teen could wear. And it's really important that we educate and give those families and those kids agency, because we don't want to single them out. We want to remind that they're just kids.
And Maralyn, for any of our listeners, any of our readers that took in the article that may be considering becoming a foster parent, just what's your messages to them about the importance and how much they're needed right now?
I've been sitting in a legislative hearing all morning, and there's 3 more days of it. We are at a crisis for needing foster families. But just like Dr. Ashley said to me, is that going through this process, reach out to your family, reach out to your village, reach out to your community. Tell them, I'm thinking about being a foster parent, but I can't do this alone. And it's overwhelming to think you can, because it's really hard, but it's worthwhile and meaningful. And I want you to know that organizations like mine exist to support you through that process, to handhold you when times get really hard. My organization has sent pizza to big families when they get new placements or sometimes lose placements. We don't talk about that enough, that like you love on a kid for a day or a month or a year, and then they go home, right? That's part of the foster care. Half of the kids that come into care will reunify, right? Mm-hmm. There's grief with that. And sometimes that's sad, but just know that, like what you saw firsthand on Saturday, is that there is a village standing behind you, holding your hand, that on the hardest days, on the best days, and on the worst days, on the frustrating days when you can't find your caseworker and really need someone to help watch your kids, there is a community to support you.
And I know I asked you this question on Saturday, but I want to ask you again. That way we can get it for our listeners. But the most impactful thing you took away from Saturday's event was what?
Well, I did tell you, I'm pretty sure my dad, who has no idea what I do, sat in the kitty corner and just cried all day. He was so proud. I think now, even several days later, it's just that sitting and hearing legislative hearings all about how bad CYFD is and all about how we need to fix child welfare, is that there's really good things happening in child welfare. Someone said the often successes of child welfare often go untold. And that's powerful, right? We only hear about the worst things, but just know that there are really good things. Like our secretary of CYFD, that's the first time she's come out. That's the first time I've worked with a secretary in 7 years that's been engaged, right? Like, we're trying to make a difference. There are happy kids in foster care. There are happy kids that will reunify to their parents, and there are happy kids that will be adopted. There are great workers. Like, there's a community behind you. And I will always say, a lot of what I do at my advocacy level, and now it's gone to the national level, is child welfare. If you look at my Twitter background, it says solutions exist. I think we lose sight of that. Anytime this month, we're going to come out with the Annie Casey rankings, and we're very likely to be last, right? Our education is last. We get so bogged down in the bad, and I'm the first to do it. I'm the first to call the news when something bad happens. But moments like Saturday remind us, A, who we're working for, which is those kids smiling, right? Nothing else matters. It's the kids that are fishing. It's looking into their eyes and knowing all of this work is not for naught, because I'm making a difference in your life. Supporting the foster families, the grandparents. You met a great aunt who's raising her kids, right?
Yeah.
It's solutions exist. Our kids are not okay, but there are really good people who give their life day in and day out to make the world a better place. I think your podcast is helping elevate those voices, but don't lose faith.
And a very impactful event for those kids, very impactful event for the families as well. Maralyn, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you.